Okay, so let's try chapter 5, number 6a. Um, we've done problems like this, and they're not terribly difficult if you use the reference triangles, but the point of this is to practice the trig identity stuff. So in this problem, we know what tan theta is, and we got to figure out what sine theta and cosine theta are, and all we know is sine theta is positive. So a lot of times I feel like when you're first doing trig identity stuff, you have no clue where to start. So really what I try to do is there's a sine, a cosine, and a tangent involved, and so I'm trying to relate sine to tangent or cosine to tangent somehow. So we know this tan theta is sine theta over cos theta. So that will come in handy somehow. One thing we can figure out, tan theta is positive. It's 3 over 4. Sine theta is positive. So that's going to force cosine theta to be positive. So that might come in handy. You might remember one of the trig identities that says this one, tan squared theta plus 1 equals secant squared theta. And it turns out this is the key right here, this trig identity. But if you can't remember it, you can always derive it. So this is one that I feel like everybody has memorized at this point. And it kind of makes sense that might be a starting point because it involves sine and cosine. And so what we want to do is somehow relate tangent to these. Well, if I divide everything by cosine squared, then we get that trig identity I just written. This is going to be tan squared. This is 1. And then I've got 1 over cos squared, which is secant squared. I'm just going to leave it as 1 over cos squared because then I'm relating tangent to cosine directly, which is what I need. So I'm just going to leave this as cos squared theta. Okay, so tan squared is 3 over 4 squared. So we can plug that in. And that'll be 1 over cos squared. So we're getting to the point now where we can solve for cosine. So 3/4 squared is 9 over 16. And then I'm adding 1 to it, so I'm going to write that as 16 over 16. And that's 1 over cos squared. And so that'll be 25 over 16, which is 1 over cos squared. And then if I flip the fraction on the right to get cos squared over 1, or just cos squared, then I flip the 1 on the left. And then when I take the square root, I get plus or minus 4/5 equals cosine theta. But remember, 4/5, the cosine theta has to be positive. So we can say cosine theta can only be the positive one, 4/5. So there's one answer that we need. Now we need sine theta. So we can do this a couple different ways. One way is by saying sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. And then we plug in the 4/5 and solve for sine squared. And then when you take the square root, it's got to be the positive one. Or we can come over to this and just use the fact, my phone's going off, sorry. Tan theta is the same as sine theta over cosine theta. This one will be a little bit quicker. We know tan theta is 3 over 4. We know sine theta, oh no, we don't know sine theta, but we know cosine theta is 4 over 5. So if you multiply both sides by 4 over 5, so I can get rid of this, the 4's cancel. I'm left with 3/5. This 4/5 cancels with that 4/5, and then we're done. So sine theta has to be 3 over 5.